Most family business owners will tell you they have a strategic plan, but if we're honest, many of those plans are sitting on a shelf somewhere, outdated, unused, and quietly ignored. In today's episode, we're going to discuss why strategic planning is still one of the most powerful tools a family business has, and why it often fails. We will explore what happens when family members can't agree on direction, when execution breaks down, and when a plan exists but no one is actually using it. Instead of theory, we're going to walk through a real-world example that mirrors what we see every day in family businesses, because the best lessons come from practical situations you can recognize yourself in. Something you might not know is that when you work with Ferguson Alliance, we meet as a team to brainstorm and discuss client situations. So even if you primarily only work with one of our advisors, you get insights from all of us. We're going to demonstrate what that looks like and give you a peek behind the scenes by discussing the Miller family. This is not a real client. We would never divulge client confidentiality. This is a made-up example that reflects the kinds of issues that our clients come to us with. Let me welcome the Ferguson Alliance business advisors and introduce you to our hypothetical case study. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Price.
Well, today we're going to discuss the Miller family, and they own the Miller Family Manufacturing Company, the MFMC. I'll refer to that later on throughout the rest of the podcast. So a little background. The Miller family owns a second-generation manufacturing business with about 120 employees and strong, steady revenue. The company has been profitable for years, but growth is stalled. Margins are tightening, competitors are getting more aggressive, and the family feels increasing pressure about the future. On the surface, everything looks fine, but underneath, alignment is breaking down. Here's a more in-depth look at the challenges surrounding MFMC. The company is owned and led by three siblings, Mark, Susan, and David. Mark, the oldest, is cautious. He wants to stabilize operations, protect cash flow, and avoid risk. Susan wants controlled growth, new products, better systems, and reinvestment in leadership. David, the youngest, is pushing hard for aggressive expansion and acquisitions. Each of them believes they are acting in the best interest of the business. They do have a strategic plan, but it's a thick document they created 2 years ago during an offsite. It hasn't been revisited since. No one can clearly explain the priorities, and managers don't use it to guide decisions. As a result, leadership meetings turn into debates instead of decisions. Managers are unclear on what matters most. Projects get started but not finished, and frustration grows, both inside the family and across the organization. What should they do? That is a lot to unpack. There's a lot going on here. So I'm going to divert to Rob. Tell us what is actually really going on here.
Well, Price, as you are going through the scenario, the quote from the Cheshire Cat and Alice in Wonderland comes to top of my mind, which is, every road will get you there if you don't know where you're going. And I think that's where we are with this. And this is very common. We see this all the time. There's been effort, there's been an investment to have strategic conversations, to think about the future, but it's never looked at again. It's not really institutionalized into the thinking of the business. So it gets stale. All of those opinions that the three siblings had are not, I mean, they're okay, they're good, they're sound, but there's no agreement on where the ultimate destination is. So what's really going on here is there's this no common purpose, there's no common vision between the three of them. Without that, everybody's going to be wandering off on their own direction. So again, hence the Cheshire Cat, any road will get you there if you don't know where you're going. And that's what's happening here.
Thinking about what the motivations are of the three owners here. What do they want? There's a reason why things are stagnating. So is that coming from a motivational standpoint on their part? Are they feeling stagnant in what they're doing and what's going on? And so first, understanding from a cohesive standpoint how they want to move forward operating the business. Because I think until you figure that out, it's going to be hard to execute anything from a strategic plan without knowing what they all want as the outcome, both professionally and personally and as a family.
Brandy, you made me think about something else and I'm going back to Jan's comment about leadership. I don't know if this is going on or not, but if there truly is a struggle of leadership going on, what happens is then, see, ownership doesn't equate to leadership. We got to get that really clear. Just because you're an owner, and maybe you're an equal owner, in this case, maybe they own a third, a third, a third. That doesn't mean that they have a third, a third, a third leadership. Having co-leaders is disastrous for a company, in my opinion. I've seen a couple make it work with co-leaders, but it's not easy. You really have to have one leader here. And what happens when that leadership role isn't clearly defined, then individuals start fighting to be right. And as they start to be right, they're proving the others to be wrong. And so then you begin having debates and unproductive conversations and conflicts between right and wrong. Instead, the conversation really needs to turn into, well, what is right? What's right for the greater good of the whole of the company, right? And so I think that could be, and that's where Jan was going with leadership, that could be a possible underlying current that's causing some of the problems with execution and getting clarity and alignment. And that's, I think, where Brandy was going as well. Culturally, if one or all the leaders are burnt out or feeling complacent, then that is going to cascade into the whole organization. And so we like to look at strategic planning as something not as an annual or quarterly event. We look at it as it's an ongoing event from a leadership perspective, and looking at strategy and thinking strategically can actually be quite motivating, can be quite inspiring, talking about the future and dreaming about the future and then helping others dream about that future as well. But if you're constantly looking at the tactics of the day, of the constraints of the day, it can really wear you down. So those are some of the common issues that we see in working with these family businesses. Don't you think, Randy? And that kind of where you were going with that as well?
Yeah, because I think, a lot of these are symptoms that have a much deeper root cause. And I think off the cuff, we think like, oh, we just need a plan. But oftentimes there's a barrier to the execution of that plan that lies a lot deeper than just not having one together.
Yeah.
And so making sure that you are acknowledging the deeper stuff and thinking that through. It's like if you had an infection and you're like, maybe this antibiotic will work, but if you don't do the due diligence to kind of figure out what's going on, you might spend a lot of time and effort on a solution that's not going to solve your problem. Something that may help if you find yourself in this position as a business leader or a family member in a business, I think to spend some time thinking about kind of historically where the organization has been, how motivated you've been to work in that business. What are the goals? So, Price, you described one of the siblings is cautious, one believes in controlled growth, and then you've got the youngest one. Kind of laughed to myself when you declared like the youngest one, because I think that comes with its own set of like predetermined connotations of how you might view that sibling, right? And so I think it takes a lot of work, and we facilitate a lot of family conversations in the beginning of our process to get super clear on, are you going to be a business first or a family first business? What does that look like? What does that mean? How are you going to operate in that world together and then move forward with your plan?
I think that what Brandy just said, really, I've seen that happen so often that the difference in this case may be that the vision that each of these people have, or their personal vision, is so different that that's the first thing that they have to resolve, is that they have to say, okay, you see the vision this way, I see it that way, but I'm influenced, because I'm the older one, I'm influenced by what I've seen in the past that has caused some issues with what you're wanting to do. And so maybe we need to sit down and reconcile those differences personally, and then we can make some progress within the business based on what we have resolved in that issue rather than it being the strategic plan. It may be the vision.
So they have a plan on paper. Why isn't it producing
Mhm.
results?
It's because they probably haven't gone back and visited that plan and made adjustments as things changed within their business. Competition changes, economy changes, supply changes. And so if they don't go back and adjust their plan, the family business that I was with, we looked at our strategic plan twice a year, every year. And the reason that we did that was that everything can change at the drop of a hat. With technology today, things change much more rapidly than they used to. Get a strategic plan and hope that it's going to last you for 3 to 5 years just isn't realistic anymore. In these days, AI is steamrolling every business. And so, does my strategic plan that I set up 2 years ago really work? And the answer is probably no. And so, if you don't visit it all the time, I'm an advocate for putting it on your desk and looking at it every day and say, hey, this that we planned doesn't work anymore. And so every month when we have our meetings, let's take a look and see, do we need to change course? Do we need to really have a better conversation about this than we've had and move from there?
Rob, at what point do good plans typically break down in family businesses?
Well, I think we're kind of where you're first going. They're too complex. I think it's more about the complexity of the plan and the lack of understanding of your current situation and your competencies. Price, it's you've talked to me a lot about football and the different schemes. And one of the things that I think is so relevant here is if you are not able to have the skill set, the talent on your team, you adjust your plan, right? Well, it's the same thing here. We might have some really great aspirations to accomplish certain goals and objectives, but if we don't have the core competencies in our leadership or our operating systems or things of that sort, the core fundamentals of business, if they're not in place, you're not going to be able to implement. Strategic plans are too complex, trying to do too many things. I don't think that they're aligned to the actual competencies that the business has. That's why I think they fail. The third component for them failing is not everybody is aligned. We say things like, well, they're not on board or need to get buy-in, things of that. I call that just pure commitment. The commitment is missing. That commitment is a personal choice. You can't force commitment. And I think that's where leaders really make a big mistake. They convince themselves that everybody's committed, but they're not, right? They're saying, yeah, I'll do that. I understand that, but they don't get it done. And you're constantly having to go back and reinforce it. So these plans fail from being implemented because they're too complex, because there's not full commitment, and because those plans are unrealistic compared to what the competencies are currently.
Rob, how can they simplify their strategy?
Well, we're a big believer in trying to make your strategy fit on one page. Brandy loves to give me a hard time about it because she calls it actually a 2-page plan because it's front and back. But I still call it the 1-page strategic plan because it's one piece of paper. But the point is if you can actually get your strategic plan distilled in a simplified manner on one page, front or back or both, that's a quick way to simplify. And you have to make choices. You have to make strategic choices. You can't go for all things. Business owners are strong entrepreneurs. They ideate a lot. So that's where they get too complex, trying to do too many things at once. So the 1-page strategic plan, I think, is a great tool. It's a great framework to help business owners and leadership teams simplify their strategic plan so it's actually implementable.
You touched on it a little bit. What is the danger of over-engineering strategy in a family business? What are the most immediate threats or problems that a business might face
I'll let anybody answer that. I've been doing all the talking.
Dan?
I think one of the biggest things that I've seen, I worked a lot in the banking industry before, and one of the things that I saw repeatedly was there was a nice, effective strategic plan that no one knew about. The employees weren't told. They knew the mission, they knew the vision. Those were posted all over the banks, but you did not see a strategic plan that was provided to employees. And so I think it's very important that your staff members who can at least impact some of the strategic direction of the company should know what that is. If they don't know what it is, it's really hard to work towards that. And it's hard to be, as Rob pointed, a team member that can contribute towards that. I think it's important to have that be something that you include in your onboarding, especially in a family business, which is usually a pretty tight-knit group. And so that you know exactly where the boat's rowing and what direction you need to row with the boat. And it doesn't get changed along the way and somebody forgets to tell you. I think that's important. I think you see that happening quite a bit in the family businesses are worked with.
Brandy, once they have a one-page strategy, where does it actually come to life day to day?
That's where the real work starts. I like to remind clients and teams of this often, that the real work starts when you have to start executing on that plan. I think the best way to do this, we call this leadershiping process, and that's bringing the future to the present. And so realizing that the future is coming, no matter what you do to stop it, tomorrow is coming. And that means that it's coming for your business as well. And so, yes, we get bogged down in our day to day. We feel like this is mission critical. We've got to do this today. We've got to attack this today. It's equally as important to be thinking about what the future is bringing for the business and what are you doing today to bring alignment and clarity for your team for the future. That's the big key to kicking this off. A lot like what Jan was saying, keeping it alive every day, whether you have it on your desk, whatever it may be, but to make sure that especially as a leader, you are bringing that team back every day to some higher picture thinking, and you're not just getting bogged down in the day to day.
Yeah, let me add to that. And Brandy and I were just meeting with a client yesterday and having this exact conversation, that in order to bring it to today, leadership has to, Brandy calls it, have a strategic mindset. Well, what does that mean? That means that when you're making a decision, you're thinking about how is this decision going to affect our strategy, one of our strategic intents, or how is this consistent or not consistent with our core values or our mission that we have? When we make this hire, is this person going to be accretive to our approach to achieve our mission? When we add a new product line, or when we make an acquisition, or when we discipline an employee, all of that has to line up with our strategy. And that's a difficult transition for operating leaders to make. And you got to exercise that muscle. And the only way to exercise that muscle is by prompting leadership to pause a moment and ask that one question: how is this going to help or hurt our strategy? And the strategy is the vision, the mission, the values, strategic intents. When we say strategy, we mean all of that together. And so if leadership could pause for a moment, ask that question, and then make their decision, or then make their announcement, even when they're writing a memo, right? Or making an announcement, a big announcement. How does this demonstrate that we're making progress on our strategic intents? So that's how you have to incorporate it in your day-to-day life and activity, is what Brandy was saying.
I want to circle back to our culture coach. We've been talking a lot about strategy and the business part of business. I want to dive back into the family part of family businesses. How do the family dynamics in this case study influence or undermine the strategy?
Well, I think, by not having clear direction on who's making decisions and driving the organization. That's number one. Again, you have to get very clear on who are the decision makers for what types of decisions. How is it going to go? Who's going to be driving and owning what piece, right? Because accountability comes into a huge part of it. If everyone feels like it's the other person's job to drive for success in something, then you're going to have a really tough time achieving it, first of all. And then number two, knowing how you went astray in the process. So getting clear on that. And again, I will go back to it again and again and again, because I think that this was something, and this is more from a personal standpoint, it's just, it takes a long time to answer the question of, is this what I really want? Am I here out of obligation or out of legacy? Or is this something that I really want? Because it's not something you really want. It doesn't matter if you declare it now or if you declare it in 3 years. That's going to be true for you. Really taking the time to understand what it is you want. What are your motivations? What are your goals for your personal life and for your family, spending the time on that, because if you're not in it to win it, it's going to translate into the business. Regardless of how much time you spend trying to mask it, it is going to come through in that business and it is going to impact it. You cannot fake your way through this. And so you've got to understand where you're at, what you're doing, and where you want to go. And then honestly, I hate to say that the rest of it comes easy, but it feels a lot easier because you've got the motivation there. You're clear on your objectives, you're clear on your goals, and it does feel a lot easier than when you were unclear on all of that, but you were still trying to make it happen and it just wasn't working. Because honestly, you weren't looking in the right place to figure out why it wasn't working. You were sitting there going, well, we need some more bullet points under this vision here. And it's not about that. It's about understanding yourself and how to lead that business.
I would agree with Brandy. It sounds like to me that some of the things that are going on with this family could be a little bit of sibling rivalry. You know, it's like the young one always feels like they're overlooked. The oldest always thinks they're right. You know, you just never know until they resolve those family issues. And like Brandy said, you got to understand that that's where you need to be looking rather than assuming it's the plan that's the problem. It's not. In many cases, especially in families, the family dynamic really is what you need to be looking at.
That's right,
Yeah.
Randy and Jen. That's the nuance about strategic planning with family businesses is it's very emotional. In a non-family business, which is where I had probably 25, 28 years of experience in, was a non-family business. Yeah, it can be, but it's not really emotional, right? But when you have your siblings or your children or your cousins involved, it's emotional. And I think that's the nuance that makes it so challenging doing strategic planning in a family business. I really like your point, Brandy, about are you in it to win it? You want to really distill what is strategy? It's how you're going to win. That's really all it is. How are you going to win in the marketplace? And what is winning? Well, winning is how you define it as a family business, but generally it's how are you going to grow your business better, faster than your competition? How are you going to do that from a values perspective? So that's what it means to be in it to win it. But your point that both you guys are bringing up, you got to be authentically in it. And you can't be in it to win it for you to be right. As a sibling, in this case, we have 3 siblings. We see this too many times is the definition of being right is driving what should be right for the whole business, doing right as opposed to being right. So I think family businesses they're a lot of fun to work with because they're creative, they're innovative, they're naturally looking a lot longer term than a non-family business. They're a little more risk adverse, which I like versus non-family businesses. But the nuance is they're family. And family's great when they're great, and families can be challenging when they're challenging. And so navigating those conversations, and I think that's our role as facilitators, is just to help facilitate those conversations. You have to have them. You can't set them on the side. You can't bury your emotions, but having them in a safe way that everybody knows that we're all fighting for the same thing. Again, we know where we're headed.
Right.
It's not the Cheshire Cat syndrome anymore. We all are committed to getting to this one place. Now, how? There's different ways to do that. So let's discuss how to do that.
And I think Brandy's point about asking yourself the question, is this what I really want? If you're just doing it because you think you should, that's probably the wrong reason. If it's not really deep down what you want, and you don't want to have the company hanging as an albatross on your neck that you feel like you need to be doing, but you really don't want to be doing, then you need to make that admission to yourself and to the family, and then the others can move on in a prosperous way, and you can go on and do what you want to do. I've seen that so many times that you feel an obligation to take over where your parents left off or something of that sort, and you really don't want to. You really want to go, be a peasant in the desert or something, and you put on your business suit every day and you hate every second of it. That's not beneficial to anyone in the group.
Okay, I want to go into more of a quick role-playing exercise with everybody. Everybody has distinct backgrounds and experiences. Rob touched on it earlier, the difference between leadership and ownership. So let's assume the three Miller siblings are owners, but they hire you as a non-family member executive in their company. So what would a non-family executive notice immediately that the family may not?
They may notice that the books aren't done properly. They may notice that people are within the company that really shouldn't be. They're just in there because they're Aunt Susie's cousin or Susie's daughter. And so they may be able to recognize that that's not good for the company. They may recognize that there's interference by some people in the family that shouldn't be. And so, those are decisions that it's hard for family members to make, but a third party can at least recognize those things and bring it to the forefront where maybe someone in the family wouldn't do so. And I love Rob's illustration of where our families within the rooms. And so that's something that he goes through, or we go through often in our strategic planning and governance, is saying who belongs in what room and are they staying there.
Brandy, as a non-family member executive at the Miller Family Manufacturing Company, what would be the first thing that you noticed that the family might not?
Everything is not as it seems, and everyone already knows that. Meaning that oftentimes the family members they're probably thinking like, okay, we've been doing a really good job of keeping all of this under wraps. No one's really picking up on this. This has been internal. We just got to figure this out. Usually everybody has an idea of what's going on. They know. And so I would say that's probably one of the first things I would pick up on going into it. I mean, especially in the culture sphere that I live in a lot, I just pick up a lot on people interactions and what that looks like. And they probably are not realizing the impact that it's having in the organization and the significance of it. They think like, oh, that's our stuff. That's not getting in the way. And it absolutely is. 100%, probably more than anything else.
Yeah, I agree. If I was the non-family member CEO, and I've been in that situation before, Brandy and Jan are really, they're spot on. And the way I say that is, Jan mentioned that decision authorities are not clear. In other words, who owns what decisions isn't clear. And Brandy's right is that there is this propensity to maintain harmony above everything else. What the real issue is with both of them is there's never been a conversation or a consensual decision if we are a family first business or a business first family. That's where it all starts. Because once you make that decision, either way, you now know how everything else is going to come out. If you decide you're going to be a family first business, then that's a clear signal that any decision that is going to be made that's important from a strategy perspective is going to benefit the family first. So maybe not getting the most qualified person in a role because a family member needs a job will probably take precedent. But if you decide consensually you're going to be a business first family, then the decision of, well, who is and who is not going to be the leader that's going to be best for the business becomes crystal clear. And typically, most of the family members will not be the best leader. Not always, but to be able to make that decision requires some thoughtfulness and some commitment. So I think that's where I would see it coming in, hasn't been agreed upon and defined. And then once that is agreed upon and defined, then you can start making other decisions related to strategy.
As we wrap up, here's the big takeaway from today's conversation. Strategic planning still matters. Maybe more than ever, but only if it's actually being used. What we saw in the Miller family story is something many family businesses experience. Good intentions, smart people, and hard work. Yet progress stalls because there's no shared direction. A strategic plan isn't meant to be perfect or complicated. It's meant to create clarity, align people, guide decisions, and to keep the business moving forward as conditions change. If your plan is sitting on a shelf, it's probably time to dust it off, simplify it, and start using it as a living tool, not a document you finished once and forgot about. And if you're listening and thinking, this sounds familiar, but we're not sure where to start, you don't have to figure it out on your own. At Ferguson Alliance, we help family businesses step back, get aligned, and build practical strategic plans that drive execution, not just discussion. Sometimes all it takes is an outside perspective to cut through the noise and bring clarity. The future is coming whether you plan for it or not. The question is whether you want to shape it or react to it. Family business is hard. Clarity makes it easier. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.